Hey, this is Sean Dinsmore, Cavo from Unity 2, and you are listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Isn't it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studio is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on X at No Shock Pod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Big Strix Vinyl Records and Sports Cards, located in Rock Island, Illinois. New, vintage, and previously owned. You can find it at Big Strix. We would like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. And our guest is
Sean Cavo Dinsmore,
formerly of the Toasters and Unity 2.
Currently promoting his work with the Pacific Music Group and Family Style Records.
Let's get to that interview.
All right, good night.
Good night. Sean, also known as Cavo, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce to you my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Yeah, thanks for joining us tonight.
Nice to meet you. Greetings from Hong Kong, where it's very early in the morning.
That's a first for us.
This is a first. Let's get right into this. You've had quite the career in the music industry. Before we dive into your past endeavors, let's talk a little bit more about your work with Family Style Music, with MC Jin and the Pacific Music Group.
Okay. Yeah, that's, I'm going to be late for work today because of this podcast, which is fine. Because, I'm running the hip hop label there, which is called Family Style Records. And, we started Pacific Music Group, less than a year ago. And, I've been based in Asia for the past 25 years, the last 15 of it in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. And, my partner, Jonathan Serbin, and we started a company before this called B2 Music. And we were doing a lot of music business services. Mostly we were handling social media accounts in the mainland because they have a completely different ecosystem there. There's no WhatsApp, there's no, Instagram, there's no YouTube, So anyway, we helped a lot of Western stars get onto the Chinese platforms and grow their, presences there. So that company was doing pretty well. And then, John is a music lawyer and also, has an MBA. So he went off to run Warner Music for 5 years. So he was running the Asia region, and I was taking care of B2. And then he left Warner last year, and we decided to start this Pacific Music Group. And, with a very obvious nod towards the Atlantic label, which, when Atlantic founded, the entire, kind of epicenter of the music world was the US, and to some extent the UK. Mm-hmm. And And so, our opinion is that now it's shifting towards Asia. So we started Pacific Music Group, and it's been interesting. So the hip hop label is called Family Style, and we linked up with MC Jin, who's one of our founders, and he and I are running the Family Style together.
Fantastic. You mentioned the challenges with social media and stuff. Are there any other challenges with integrating the Western Eastern culture of music?
Well, it's just pretty specific to China because, for instance, I'm in Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong, we have Facebook and Instagram, and we have all the Western platforms here. But if you just cross the border into Shenzhen, suddenly you're behind the Great Firewall of China and you don't have any of those things. And then instead you have to be on Weibo or Douyin, which is Chinese TikTok, or, they have their own DSPs as well. So you're either on QQ Music or NetEase Music. So, China is like pretty far advanced in a lot of respects. So like basically if your music is on Douyin, which is the parent company ByteDance, also used to own TikTok, but they had to sell it because of Trump, right? So, So if you're on Douyin, which is Chinese TikTok, you're not on TikTok. Yeah. And so if you have like a really, really healthy millions of followers on Western TikTok, and let's say, sort of pre-COVID, a lot of like big EDM DJs were touring in China regularly and making a lot of money. But then they would call us and say, hey, we played in front of like 50,000 people at this festival, but we don't see any Chinese comments on our YouTube. It's like, yeah, hello, they don't have YouTube. Yeah. So that kind of like, they always say that Hong Kong is the office and China is the factory. That's still true to some extent. So it's a good place to be because you have access to the Chinese market, but you also have access to the Western markets.
Well, I wanted to bring this back to B2 Music. You founded B2 Music back in 2016. Can you tell our listeners about the foundations it took to create B2 4 years prior to the pandemic, and how did the pandemic affect you only 4 years into it?
Well, so actually, this is really interesting. So John Serban and I, we originally met in 1990 when he was a junior lawyer at my lawyer's office on 57th and Broadway. And he worked on my first Unity 2 Warner Brothers contract as a junior lawyer. So we actually never really met then, but we were, in the same room. So my lawyer was his boss. So we met again. We bumped into each other in 2009 in Shanghai. I was living in Shanghai. And we were like, I was running this creative hub. And in that place, we had like a small restaurant. We had a bar. We had a recording studio. We had a pop-up retail space. We had a digital editing suite. We had a gallery. It was all, something you could have only done in Shanghai in 2009 because there were no rules, right? So he was sniffing around the recording studio, and we kind of like, eyed each other. And I said, yeah, you look kind of familiar. Where are you from? He said, I'm from New York. I said, yeah, me too. I said, oh, what did you used to do? He goes, well, I was an entertainment lawyer. I said, huh, you ever heard of Mark Levinson? He goes, yeah, Mark Levinson was my boss. So then we connected all the dots, and he goes, what group? And I said, Unity 2. And he said, oh my God, I worked on your Warner agreement. So that was 2009. So, we kind of knew we were going to do something together. We just hadn't figured it out yet. So I moved down to Hong Kong in 2011, and then John started running Billboard for Asia. So when that gig came along, he approached me and said, hey, I'm going to, are you interested in running, like opening up like a billboard for Hong Kong? I said, sure, why not? It sounds great. That never happened, but instead we formed B2 Music because I had identified so much talent, and and he's always been in the music business. So we were connected with Billboard in the sense that the B from B2 Music, we used that same small B, and our first investor was at the time the president of Billboard, John Amato. So there were a lot of connections. We ended up putting together a lot of compilations, like Best of Asia compilations for Billboard, Vibe, and Spin, which were all under their umbrella.
Oh, very good.
That's a lot of work.
That was fantastic. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess so. I mean, I'm familiar with U.S. markets and selling CDs and physical product and vinyl. Can you talk a little bit about how it works in China?
Well, I mean, again, so China is always a very specific beast compared to the rest of Asia. So there's really only one market in Asia that still sells physical, like a lot of physical, and that's Japan. The Japanese just seem to be naturally collectors by nature, and so I think like something like 70% of their record business is still physical CDs, actually, and vinyl. But everywhere else, it's streaming, and certainly in China, it's streaming. And as soon as the Spotify, Apple Music model got so big in the U.S. and in the West generally, well, actually the whole world, the Chinese government got very serious about monetizing music. So when I first moved to Shanghai in 2006, literally 95% of the market was illegal downloading. It was, the whole thing was piracy. And you could find any song online and you could download it for free, because the government just wasn't paying attention to it. And then when I kind of even before Spotify, but around that time, when Xi Jinping came in, he just basically said, look, hey guys, like there's money here and you've got 2 years to clean up your act, and then we're going to start doing this legit. And they did it, they did it. And now, whereas Western artists used to be able to tour very easily in China, that's become harder since COVID. Like now it's much more difficult to get that entertainment visa. Yeah. But what has happened, and this is the reason why they should still be on Chinese social media platforms and DSPs, is because now you can make money the same way you can make money in Spotify or Apple Music, and big artists are making serious money in China from streaming.
Well, let's talk a bit more about your travels. It's not every day that we talk to an artist that has, relocated from United States to China / Hong Kong area. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about what took you to that area of the world, leaving the States when you did?
Well, this is another part of it. So after the Toasters and Unity 2, and after I had like a brief thing called Super Cuz, and basically I kind of got reacquainted with I kind of got reacquainted with my Beatles records, and I started listening to all the George Harrison stuff with sitar, and I got really into that. And I started making beats. I was working with a lot of young rappers. Unity 2 had been like a reggae hip hop group. And so I inherited an MPC 60 from DJ Doc. I don't know if he's kind of like one of the unsung heroes of early hip hop. He engineered some huge records for like Biz Markie, EPMD, Stetsasonic, Redman, like crazy stuff. So we had this MPC, which was the old original 60, and he was upgrading to the 2000, I think it was at that time. So he sold it to, he sold it to my roommate, who was a Japanese DJ called Hiro, and we lived on St. Mark's Place in New York. And Hiro sold it to me, and I started learning it and just, making these very rudimentary beats using sitars and any other Indian sounds I could get. And I didn't really know what to do with it. So I went to India in 98, and I bought a whole bunch of vinyl records there that were like Bollywood soundtracks. And I had no idea what they were. I just bought them. And then I started sampling them. And I had all these tracks. And so I just put out this record called, it was by, I didn't have a name for the group. So on the back of all those records, it used to say Dum Dum India. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? So it turns out that there was only one pressing plant in India, and it was in this place called Dum Dum in Calcutta. So all the records would be stamped Dum Dum India, means like that's where this record was made, but I didn't know. So I called it Dum Dum Project.
Yeah.
And you know, I couldn't give them away because, you know, it was just too obscure. But what happened was some yoga teachers got hold of it and they started playing some of these, because it was pretty down-tempo stuff.
Yeah.
They started playing it in the yoga classes and then it caught on there. And the next thing I know, the distributor, like this devotional distributor is calling and saying, like, we'd like to order, you know, 50 copies or 100 copies. I was like, wow, we're finally selling records, you know, because I'd started a little label.
Yeah.
And then I started getting emails from these British Indian guys, British Asian, they call them. And they were like, hey, man, we found your record at Rough Trade. And we know we really love it. If you ever come over to the UK, we'd love to have you on at our club night. And I was like, wow. So I started, you know, talking to these guys, and then they brought me over, and then I signed a record deal with this small label in London called Silver Screen Records, and they had an office in New York. So connect the dots. The guy that was running the New York office used to book the West Coast hip hop for famous artists agency, and they were our agency. I was in Unity too, so I knew this guy, and he's called Yusuf Gandhi. But at the time when he was working for Norby Walters, nobody could pronounce his name, so they called him Joe Gandhi. So like the first time I ever met him, he was like, hey, I'm Joe Gandhi, and I said, hey, I'm Vic Hitler, how you doing? You know, it was like the most hilarious name. And so we were kind of friendly. He booked the West Coast, so he booked some gigs for us when I was in Unity too. So I signed with them and put out the second Dum Dum record. And that one, we went over to London like a week prior to 9/11 to do our record launch. And that went really well. And we did like a little tour. We went to Paris and a couple places. And I kind of picked up, I had a sitar player. There was a friend of mine from the East Village. And I had this little, like, you know, Bangladeshi, like, Daiki chick from London who was playing tablas. And I had a rapper called Shanti, the one Shanti, who's still working. And he's like a Indian kid from Brooklyn. So we had this really, really weird, you know, act. And we took it around to, like, Berlin and, you know, all over Europe, because we were, you know, you could fly cheap then. Ryanair was just happening and stuff like that. So that got me to London. And then 9/11 happened, so I couldn't go back to New York anyway. And then I just stayed. And then my record got released in Asia, so that took me to, like, I did an Asian tour, and that took me to Bangkok. And then I decided that I was gonna, you know, I was in Bombay for a while, and then I decided I was going to move. So I moved to Bangkok, and I lived in Bangkok for 3 years. And then I moved from Bangkok to Shanghai, and then from Shanghai to Hong Kong.
Wow.
So each step along the way, you know, it was music was the reason why I moved, but it wasn't as if, like, you know, like, I know expats here, right? And expats are like, their job took them there. Yeah. And I'm always like, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess my job took me there, but it was more like, you know, I would move to a place because I was really interested in that place, and then I always could DJ. You know, I could always work in that sense, and not make tons of money, but I could work.
Absolutely. I wanted to bring this back to the Dum Dum Project. You know, it was a project of the 90s. It started out at, you know, it seemed like the project was ahead of its time with the fusion that was used. Did you ever expect for it to take off like it did?
Not really. I mean, no. I mean, my partner and I, we started this little record label in the East Village on St. Mark's Place, simply to put these records out because, you know, I didn't have a label. And at that time, we had this idea that we were going to distribute Indian devotional music into like yoga centers in America, which was actually probably a good idea. But we were, you know, basically two creatives. We didn't really have a business sense. So when we came back from that first trip to India, I just put that record together because I was already having fun with the sampler and wanting to make beats. I kind of had this desire and this need to like make these beats, but getting vocalists on and turning them into like songs, that wasn't really in my mindset. I was more like, club oriented. Mm-hmm. So if it hadn't been for like kind of like the yoga scene in America, I don't know that it ever would have really taken off like that. And when I say taken off, it did afford me the ability to sort of roam the world a bit, mm-hmm. and if you're a DJ and you're strictly playing other people's music, you can get booked if you're a good DJ and you'll make X amount. But if you're touring and you're touring, from your CD that you've released, you get paid differently, and you get promoted differently. So that worked to my advantage, but still, I mean, like, it's not like, I wasn't like Fatboy Slim, it was like, and there were times when I was in London and then like some promoter would call up and say, hey, I've got a gig in Warsaw and Krakow, but it's only paying like, £500 total. And I'd be like, I'm in, I'll do it, and that was it, because I mean, when else was I going to go to Warsaw and Krakow? You know what I mean? So
that's true. And
it was super fun, super, super fun. I mean, I always enjoyed that stuff a lot.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, and talking about the Eastern music and stuff, around, in America, we got a lot of people trying to, build their own home studios and doing things DIY and things, maybe going less away from studios. But how is that working over in the Asian markets? Do they still go to a traditional studio, or how does it work?
It's pretty much the same, because, kids can get the internet has really democratized everything. You can find all the gear. But I will say that, for those early records and both of the first two Dum Dum albums, I mean, we recorded those during graveyard shift hours, admittedly, but at Green Street Recording Studio, which is like, where all the big hip hop, Public Enemy made all their records there. I mean, everybody made their records there. It was a really, really amazing studio with like a 24-track SSL in the A room, and in the B room had a Neve. I mean, it was proper gear, and we made them on 2-inch tape. I mean, that's why it's kind of a pain in the ass, because people occasionally say to me, like, how about a remake of this? Can I get the stems? And I'm like, stems? We didn't have any stems. It's all on 2-inch tape. Sitting in my brother's house in Maine somewhere, so I mean, kids definitely are making tracks and recording tracks. And now I'm in the Asian hip hop game, and I'm seeing how these kids can make big records, and even shoot their video very DIY for very little money. But they usually have to, you can tell the difference of a record that's been like mastered in a nice place,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But sometimes it's the ones that haven't been that actually hit, just because of the quality of the hook or the quality of the melody or whatever it is, what he's rhyming about. So, yeah, I mean, it's the story of music now, right? Like anybody can get on Spotify, but how do you find the person, right?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I wanted to change gears on you here. So, in 2018, you produced the Red Stripes in the Ska East, and that album is so cool because it's so vintage ska. It also features guest appearance from Neville Staple. That had to be a unique experience for you.
Yeah. That was like that was a total fanboy moment. Yeah, because the Red Stripes are like a very unique sort of trad ska outfit, and it just happens to, again, they're all expats living in Hong Kong who grew up with two-tone like I did, and they kind of found out that I was here, the guy from the Toasters, and I found out that they were here because when we started B2 Music, our first office was a recording studio where a friend of mine had some space in his studio, and so I can't remember exactly how it happened, but like the Stripes, I think they started like rehearsing there or something. But anyway, they found me, and then I went to a couple of their gigs, and they were really super tight. And I, at one day I was talking with the bass player Paul, who's kind of like the leader, and I said, are you guys going to make an album? And he's like, yeah, we want to, but we don't really know what to do. I said, well, the studio is there. I can make sure you get preferred rates. And he's like, yeah, but who's going to produce it? So I was like, I'll do it, and I mean, completely did it for free. I mean, it was really bare bones. But so every year, Paul Thompson, he puts on this Hong Kong Reggae and Ska Festival, I think it's called. And usually they save up their money from their gigs and stuff, and they bring over like one, big kind of artist. And that year it was Neville. And so I was shocked when they told me that they were going to bring Neville over. So, because we had never met. I was long gone from the Toasters by the time the Toasters went over to the UK to tour. So we met, and we were in the studio, and like he and his wife and I got along, great. And his wife is called Sugary. And, they're from Coventry, and we just talked about music and stuff like that. And then when he came in to work in the studio, I kind of had an idea of what they wanted from him, which was like, I don't know if you remember, like, side 2 of More Specials, their second album, was kind of a lot of like Neville doing a lot of like, just sort of freeform chatting on the mic.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this one track, and I said, like, just do something like that, just talk about Hong Kong or something. And that's exactly what he did. And then it was, our job to like sort of dub him out and stuff.
Oh, it's so cool. It's a great album. The thing about that album though is you can't find it on vinyl here in the States. It's almost impossible.
Really?
No, I can't find it. You can find a copy here and there on compact disc, but nothing on vinyl.
I think it was limited edition, the vinyl. It was red vinyl, I think. I know it was available on Jump Up Records out of Chicago. But they probably sold out the vinyl because it was pretty limited edition.
Yeah. I want to take it to, I think it was 2008. You worked with MC Yogi, and Elephant Power was the name of the album. I was very intrigued by that one. I was enthralled and listened to the whole thing start to finish. I couldn't stop listening. It was great. It was a good blend of, the rap and the hip hop and
of the Hindu philosophy. Yeah.
And the Hindu stories. I loved it.
Yeah, he's a unique character, man. Like, we're still in touch, actually. That's another one where, my past caught up with me. I was sitting in Shanghai, and I had just finished that gig. The first reason I went over to Shanghai was opening up another place. And so I was kind of like just DJing and kind of hanging out. And I got this email from him, and he's like, hey, I'm a rapper from the East Bay, and, I'm also a yoga teacher. And I'm a big fan of the Dum Dum Project and blah, blah, blah. And I want to make a record. And tell me what you think. This is a song I made called Ganesh is Fresh. And I started laughing. And I listened to it, and I was like, wow. And this guy sounded like he was like, the fourth Beastie Boy. Like he kind of had a nice flow. And it was kind of old school. And so I wrote him back, and I said, yeah, I dig it, and we kept going back and forth, and he said, I want to make a whole album. And so he signed a deal with, at that time, it was probably the biggest like devotional label in America called White Swan. And I knew them because they distributed the Dum Dum Project records. So he's like, yeah, I'm talking to White Swan. What do you think? And I said, who's good? Anybody else calling your name? And he's like, no. And I said, well, sign with them, let's make it, then he was like, would you come produce the record? So we worked out some terms, and I flew over to San Francisco, and we spent like a week in the studio. And honestly, him and his engineer, a guy called Robin Livingston, they kind of knew what they wanted, but I kind of just came in to add some sauce, I like on Ganesh is Fresh, there was an element or two that was missing, and some of the skits I came in and I wrote a couple of the songs from scratch, just like providing the beat and stuff like that. but overall, it was just kind of like turning it into an album. And then I left, and they just kept working on the mixes, and then it came out, and he was, I mean, for about 4 or 5 years, I'd say he was the number one artist on that scene, and that's a scene. It's a scene that not everyone knows about, but it's a pretty big scene. I mean, there's a guy called Krishna Das on that scene who I think won a Grammy. And you know, there's some celebrities that hover around that scene, like Sting and other people too. So I think Madonna was around it for a minute. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so like that scene is there, and Yogi had a really fresh angle. And I do remember at the time when we were in the studio, I said, "Are you going to make some regular, just like straight up hip hop tracks?" And he was like, "Yeah, after this record." But then he said, "I don't know. I'm in this lane. I may stay in this lane." And he has stayed in that lane. And he's done very well for himself.
So cool. All right, so we're going to go back to 1990 along with Lionel Bernard, Nene, released the Unity 2, What Is It, Yo album. You know, that album is brilliant, and mixed of reggae, ska, hip-hop. It was very progressive for its time. Tell us more about the creation of Unity 2, the album, etc.
Well, Lionel and I had kind of called ourselves Unity 2 for a while, like even before we even got into Toasters. And the around 82, 83, 84, I joined the Toasters in 85. So there was like this very, very small, kind of very two-tone oriented ska scene in New York. I mean, it was tiny. It was basically, there was probably a core of about 10 of us. But yeah, I started to notice that there was other kids kind of hanging out who looked kind of like mods and kind of like rude boys. It was a very small scene. So we called ourselves Unity 2. It was mostly me because I used to write graffiti. So I used to write Unity was my tag. And actually, so I used to kind of keep it going, and it was something I liked to do. So, and then when the Toasters, when I first became aware of the Toasters, I started drinking with, Bucket was the leader, and he used to drink on Avenue A. We used to drink on St. Mark's Place at the Holiday Cocktail Lounge, and Bucket used to drink at this bar called Blanche's that we thought was kind of a little bit too Polish and just kind of like, a little too local. There weren't a lot of girls there, So anyway, he and I became friends, and he was like, come down and see my band. I'm in a ska band. And I was like, he didn't look like a ska guy to me, right? So I went down to see his band, and they were pretty arty. And so I was kind of not impressed. But then they put a record out, like an EP, and Joe Jackson produced it, I found out. And that impressed me because I was a Joe Jackson fan. And so Bucket and Joe Jackson were friends because they'd met in London. Bucket was the manager of Forbidden Planet, which was a big comic book place. And Joe Jackson is apparently, in those days anyway, was a big Spider-Man freak. So he produced that record. So then that got me more interested, although the look and the feel of the band still wasn't doing it for me. So then they had a gig. They had a gig at Danceteria, which again impressed me. And he said, "Why don't you come down? Joe's going to play sax or melodica or something with us." And I was like, "Wow." He goes, "Yeah, just jump up on stage." And they sort of, do like a Chaz Smash thing from Madness. You just dance around. I said, "Okay." So I went down, I did it, had fun, got up on stage. For the first time in my life, I felt that energy when you're up on stage and there's a lot of people there, and, and Joe Jackson was on stage. So I was like, wow. So after the gig, Bucket was like, "Do you want to join the band? Like, I'm up for it." I said, "What am I going to do?" And he goes, "I don't know, just dance around." I said, okay, why not, right? So this was like 86, 87, 85. And so I said, "Look, there's only one, if I'm going to join this band, there's only one stipulation I have, and that is that my boy has to join too," which was Lionel. Yeah. So he was like, "Yeah, cool. Better to have two guys dancing than one, right?" And then, so that's how we joined, and we were already called Unity 2, in our own way. And then, the rest is history because I started writing more songs. Lionel wrote some songs, the band got bigger. But by by 89, we had put out 2 albums, and Lionel and I were getting pretty tired of being in a ska band. We loved the music, but there was a kind of limiting factor of what you could sing and talk about in the Toasters. Like, it was, Lionel wrote this political song about Haiti because he's Haitian, and I started writing some different kind of topical stuff. Plus, we were both getting really into dancehall and hip hop. And so we just split off and joined as Unity 2 and signed with Warner's. And, we made that first album. It was like, we just kind of made the album that we knew how to make because, we were not used to being like a hip hop group and just making tracks in the studio. We were used to having a live band behind us. In a lot of ways that worked didn't work to our favor because hip hop wasn't sounding like that. So, we used to tour. A lot of times we would, we'd be on the same bill as like Tribe Called Quest or, lots of different people, like anyone that was kind of like in that native tongues kind of thing. Plus they were on Warner's De La Soul. But we had a live band. We had like 7 guys. Mm-hmm. So people would be like, yo, that was amazing. You guys are great. But like, it was too expensive to take out on the road. People were used to booking, 2 guys, 3 guys, and just a DJ. So that was a little tough. So we made that record with our friends, basically. Like, the main producer was Keen Kars from Urban Blight, who was just a guy who was like we looked up to, and he was a little bit older than us, and we knew that he was a producer because he'd produced the Urban Blight singles, and we were on the same scene as them in New York. So we also worked with Sidney Mills, who worked with Boogie Down Productions, and also worked with Steel Pulse, and he was a real reggae guy from Kingston. So we just kind of made that record with our friends, and like I said, the record didn't sell particularly well. And the Toasters all started slagging us immediately, going like, see, they thought they were going to be big stars. They were not, and this record, and it didn't do anything. But it was a great experience, and we did release 3 singles, and we made 3 music videos, which was super fun. That was a lot of fun. Again, for the videos, we just recruited our friends, because we knew a lot of people, just from like being downtown at that time. That was a very, very fruitful period, like downtown in New York, starting, in the 80s with hip hop and everything exploding. And then everything in the 90s, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So the Shirley video was actually directed by Matt Dillon.
Oh, cool.
And and he was like, hey, I want to direct your guys' video. And me and Lionel were like, no way, dude, you don't know how to direct a music video. And we went to Warner Brothers, and we were like, and the guy that signed us was a guy called Benny Medina, who became famous for like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But anyway, he was at Warner because he'd signed Prince, and so he was like a king there, And he called one day and he said, I heard Matt Dillon wants to direct your video. And we were like, yeah, but we shut it down. He goes, no, you didn't shut it down. He's going to direct it. Are you stupid? That's a PR story, So we didn't know, We just were like buddies,
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
I wanted to touch upon, the What Is It Yo album as a whole, with it being such an eclectic, sound that it was. Do you feel like at that time it was just too progressive for hip hop lovers to grasp a hold of? Because I loved it. I'm a rock guy, I'm a punk guy. I love that album.
Thank you. I mean, it was not the right sound for what was happening in hip hop, right? So hip hop was, becoming increasingly, it was just sample based, and like we were like making our own samples. We didn't really have any tracks that were like that. We took the band, so we got our budget from Warner Brothers, and we went in and we just recorded these songs, drum and bass first, and then put on the guitar and put on the horns, and so it sounded too organic for hip hop. And then for other people, it was, probably for the people that might have booked us it wasn't ska, right? So that was another fan base that was, so it didn't really, the song that did best, believe it or not, was the third single, Buckwheat the Rebel, because we were in Warner's in LA one day, and they were like, they didn't really know what to do with us, right? Because, like Benny had signed us basically as like to show how cool he was with an ear to the street, but nobody really knew what to do with us. And then I think we were the first band that had a live band with a DJ scratching on stage. I'm pretty sure we were the first to do that. So one of the guys who ran the dance division was like, hey, I can help. I'll get a remix done by my friend Silk Hurley in Chicago. And, Lionel and I were like, we weren't really paying attention. And then he goes, which is the fastest song on the record? And there was the song Buckwheat the Rebel, which was like 120 or something. I can't remember, maybe 130 even. And he took the stems and gave them to Silk Hurley. And so Steve Silk Hurley did that remix, which was a very, very club-oriented remix. Right around then, the sound was like CNC Music Factory, like with those guitar stabs and stuff. So that remix actually went to number one in a couple of big markets like Philadelphia, like big, like Q1 and 2, like a P1 station, a million listeners a day. And then it went to number one in a big P1 station in Boston, New Orleans, and there was and so we flew to these places, and we would go to these big, huge dance clubs, which was becoming the new trend around 1991. And we would go out there, and they didn't, they were expecting just to hear that one song. That's all they wanted to hear. And we'd come out there, and we would just go with our DJ, because then at that time we couldn't afford to bring the whole band. And our DJ would like put up like a dub plate, and we'd start rhyming, and these people would be looking at us like we were fucking Martians, And then I would just look at the DJ, and I'd be like, buckwheat, buckwheat, buckwheat. And then he would drop the needle on buckwheat, and then they would all start dancing. And then, so that was weird. That was the beginning of the end. That's when I knew that we were not doing anymore what we wanted to do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I was just going to ask, you've written songs, you're a songwriter, not producer now. Do you still write? And what's your vault look like, your DJ Cavo vault? Do you have unreleased material?
I mean, I do, but I think almost any songwriter or beat maker or producer would tell you that they never stop. Ideas are always going, but I just don't do anything with them because I'm too, busy, working with other artists and try to impart. I mean, I signed this Indian rapper recently. He's from the northeast of India, and we're now talking about his second single, and I've got some ideas, and I'm always a little hesitant also because I'm so fucking old now. You don't want to be like the old guy coming in going like, I think you should do this, but sometimes something is so obvious that you hear that, you have to just make a suggestion. And, but yeah, I mean, I still have the ability to, I can go down rabbit holes on YouTube where like recently I've been like, Persian funk from the 70s, and I'll start listening to all these old pop records, Middle Eastern pop records, and I'll hear something, I'll be like, oh my God, and I'll loop it up. But I'm not going to do anything with it, most likely. What can I do with it? It's like, I just do it for fun because like I'm listening to the loop and I'm thinking like, this doesn't even really sound what music sounds like anymore in the hip hop space. So I just do it for fun, basically. Oh, another thing was that, 1 year, a year or two after Neville, they brought out Bucket from the Toasters. He was their big guest. So, I hadn't seen the guy in like 20 years maybe. And he was like, look, I'll do like a couple of your songs and you jump up and sing them, and we did it. And it was so much fun. Oh, cool. So much fun. I was so out of breath, but it was so, it was so much.
We have one last question for you, then we'll leave you alone. I know you got to go to work, but Unity 2 was 91, I believe, right? Is that correct? Is that kind of like the time space?
we ended in 91, but
91.
yeah, like the album came out in 90.
Yeah.
I think.
So in that time frame, there was some really cool other things going on, like Third Base, and I believe like Diggable Planets and De La Soul and stuff like that. But out of all those really cool eclectic acts that were out in the hip hop community, was there any artists at that time that just didn't make it, that you thought that were going to make it, for some reason it just didn't happen?
Us.
Outside of Unity 2, I know, of course, Unity 2, but there was so much cool stuff that was out at that time. I mean, were you just kind of like blown away by some acts that somehow didn't get signed, or they fell through the cracks, or or how record companies do? They just they don't do their due diligence when it comes to promotion.
I mean, most of the bands that I felt like a lot of bands that came out had their one big hit, or a couple big hits, and then maybe I felt like their label dropped the ball, or somebody dropped the ball. I definitely, somebody who was hugely influential to me and Lionel was Shinehead. When Shinehead first came out, it was like he was doing like everything that we wanted to do. He was singing, he was rapping, he was sampling the Beatles. I mean, he was doing everything, right? And he was so good, and we finally did a show with him in 91 maybe. And, I mean, he was the guy who, wow. Even when we were waiting to get Shirley out as a single, we were just kind of like biding our time. We'd signed the deal, but we were waiting for the record to come out. And, we used to always be out in the clubs, and we would always come back after hours to my place. I was living in a big loft down in Chinatown, and we would come back to my place, and that Shinehead record and the By All Means Necessary Boogie Down Productions record, those two records, I mean, I wore them out on my turntable. And when we finally did a gig with Shinehead, his people were saying like, hey, we're going to go and do a tour of Tokyo, and we're going to do Japan, and then we're going to do a couple of other dates. Do you guys want to come along as the opening act? And we were like, hell yeah. We were so excited about that. But again, they were like, oh shit, flights for 8 people versus flights for 3 people. It didn't happen. But we played 2 shows together in New York. And I saw that, I think it was Elektra, I saw that they were not supporting him in the way that he should have been supported. So that record, I'm sure it did well, but he could have been the crossover. He could have been Sean Paul way before Sean Paul. You know what I mean? Like, he could be a crossover guy because he was from Jamaica, but he kind of grew up in the Bronx and kind of like Riverdale. Like, he'd been exposed. His English was good, and he could rap, he could chat, he could sing. Anyway, so he was one guy, and then I was always surprised that KRS-One didn't get bigger. Like Boogie Down Productions, they would put an album out, they could sell 500,000 copies, but they could never go platinum. And I think it was the same issue at Jive. They didn't really. Maybe he was a bit controversial. I don't know. I mean, he obviously did very well for himself, so no tears there. And out of the ska scene, not really, because the ska scene, by the time anyone talks about the third wave, it was way after I was already out of it.
Yeah, very good. Well, we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to plug or promote?
I would like to promote, the artists that I'm working with on Family Style. I mean, we've signed a Korean artist called Little Cherry, and her brother is called Gold Buddha, and he's the DJ, she's the rapper. They are amazing. You can stream them on Spotify. Little Cherry, Lil Cherry. And then there's rapper, he's called Rapper Big Deal, and he's from India. You can stream him too. He's just done a devotional track, but that's kind of like a Christmas song. He does that once a year because that's from his hometown, this big festival, Hindu festival. But his other stuff is like very topical, and he's gonna have a big year. I'm convinced of it. His next song is like really hard. And then that's all I'll talk about right now, because I signed a rapper, a 13-year-old speed rapper from Indonesia, believe it or not. She's called Nada. and she's kind of like an internet sensation. You're going to be definitely hearing from her. And Jin is going to be dropping some new stuff probably in the new year. So yeah, we're expanding, and we're strictly an Asian label. So Pacific Music Group we aim to be the first Asian major. Our biggest signing so far is Tiffany from Girls' Generation. So she's like a K-pop legend. Mm-hmm. Her new album's coming out. But Family Style Records, keep your eye on it.
Oh, so cool.
Very excited for you.
This is how things are going to work out. Jeff, the editing wizard over here, gets everything cleaned up and make it sound like $1 million. I will send this link to you. If you could please share it to your socials, we'd really appreciate it.
I will, for sure.
Sean, it was an honor to have you on tonight. Thanks you for doing this so early in the morning. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. This was great.
Thanks. Hey, one question. Where are you guys based?
We're out of the Quad Cities, right on the in between Iowa and Illinois.
Cool.
Yeah. So we'll
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. It was fantastic. All right, man.
Great.
Have a good day. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Everybody they ever take from you, then